There are people who walk into our lives not to bring light, but to quietly, methodically dim it. We don't always notice at first. They wear charm like a mask. They mirror your words, feign empathy, and even cry on cue. But beneath that surface, there's something darker. I'm not here to talk about devils with horns. I'm talking about real, everyday people who exude energy so corrosive, so soul-depleting, it feels spiritual, and not the good kind. These people don't need to worship evil. They embody it. And if you're not careful, they'll pull you under with them. We've all had days when we feel worn out. Work stress, family obligations, or even a packed schedule can leave us feeling exhausted. But there's a different kind of tired that doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from being around someone who takes from you in ways that aren't physical or mental. They take from your soul. These individuals don't just leave you feeling tired, they leave you feeling empty. You can't explain it, but something feels off every time you're around them, like you're constantly losing little pieces of yourself. These people may not raise their voice or even say anything overtly hurtful. In fact, they often operate with subtlety. A backhanded compliment here, a dismissive tone there. You walk away from conversations with them questioning your worth or feeling inexplicably low. It's not what they do in obvious ways, but how they show up energetically that matters. They bring a heaviness, a kind of spiritual pollution that clings to you long after they're gone. It's the emotional equivalent of being in a room with no windows, airless, oppressive, unfree. You might notice it when you're trying to be enthusiastic about something you love, a dream, a goal, a creative spark. Instead of encouraging you, they cast shadows of doubt. Instead of saying, "Go for it," they say, "Why would you do that?" Or, "That seems risky." It's not concern, it's erosion. Little by little, your fire gets dimmer. And that's the thing, they don't need to sabotage you in big dramatic ways. They just keep nudging you off center until you're lost in your own fog. What makes it more insidious is how easily we blame ourselves. We say, "Maybe I'm just too sensitive," or "Maybe I misunderstood." We override our gut feeling because we're taught to be understanding, to give people the benefit of the doubt. But what if the benefit of the doubt is exactly what they feed on? What if their toxicity hides behind our own empathy? This is where we start to confuse compassion with self-betrayal, and that confusion is their playground. There's also a strange guilt that comes with recognizing this drain. If the person is close to you, a partner, sibling, co-worker, even a friend, you don't want to accept the truth. So you start over giving. You try to be more patient, less reactive, kinder. But no matter what you do, it's never enough. You keep pouring into a cup with no bottom. And still, they look at you like you are the one who's lacking. This is not a healthy exchange. This is spiritual theft. Eventually, you may start to feel like a stranger in your own life, disconnected from your passions, unsure of your own emotions, dulled in your joy. That's how you know it's not just your energy that's being drained, but your spirit. And it's one of the most dangerous types of harm, because it doesn't show up as bruises or breakdowns. It shows up as silence, as numbness, as you forgetting the sound of your own laughter. And sometimes, that quiet erasure is far more painful than any scream. There's a certain type of person who can't tolerate peace. Stillness unnerves them. Quiet stability feels boring, almost threatening, because it removes their favorite playground. Chaos. They aren't happy unless something is going wrong. And if nothing is, they'll create the crisis themselves. It doesn't always look dramatic. It can be small, stirring up tension in a group chat, misrepresenting what someone said, or asking leading questions just to trigger doubt and division. It's not that chaos follows them, it's that they manufacture it. This kind of person tends to have a magnetic presence, at least at first. They know how to charm, how to tell stories, how to keep things interesting. But over time, you realize that what they call interesting is really just unstable. You'll notice how problems always seem to orbit around them. If a group is thriving, they'll sow a whisper of jealousy. If a friendship is strong, they'll drop a passive, aggressive comment to fracture it. And if you question their motives, they'll act confused or hurt, like you are the one disrupting the harmony. They're addicted to emotional adrenaline. The ups and downs, the tension and release, the fights and reconciliations. And like any addiction, it has consequences for everyone involved. You may find yourself walking on emotional eggshells, trying to prevent the next explosion. You scan your conversations afterward, wondering if you said something that could be twisted. You anticipate their mood swings before they even walk in the room. Without realizing it, you become part of their cycle. Always reacting, always trying to contain a storm you didn't start. This kind of chaos isn't just situational, it's spiritual. It confuses your intuition. It clouds your judgment. You start to believe that conflict is just a normal part of being close to them. But deep down, a quieter voice inside you knows this isn't right. Healthy relationships can be intense. They can be complex. But they are not unpredictable in a way that leaves you feeling unsafe, small, or constantly unsettled. When chaos becomes the background noise of a relationship, it stops being dynamic and starts being dangerous. Worse, they often gaslight you about the chaos they create. When something goes wrong, they somehow flip the narrative. "I was just trying to help." Or, "You're making a big deal out of nothing." Or the classic, "You're too emotional." They paint themselves as the victim, the misunderstood hero in a world full of overreactors. And just like that, the damage they caused becomes your burden to carry. Your fault, your flaw, your failure to understand them correctly. It's emotional warfare dressed in innocence. You might notice they get visibly uncomfortable during moments of genuine calm or joy, especially when it doesn't involve them. If you're happy without their input, they'll find a way to interrupt it. They can't stand not being at the center of emotional gravity. So they rattle the cage, throw a wrench in the works, or stir up resentment just to reassert control. The pattern is predictable. Peace threatens their power, so they poison it before it grows roots. That's how chaos becomes not just a symptom, but their strategy. There are people who seem incredibly attentive. They listen. They ask questions. They remember details. At first glance, this feels like empathy. It feels like care. But over time, you start to notice something is off. They don't respond to your pain with softness. They respond with calculation. Your vulnerability doesn't move them. It informs them. It gives them information. It tells them where your wounds are, how you react, what matters most to you. And rather than protect those soft spots, they store that knowledge away for later. Real empathy requires emotional connection. It requires sitting with someone in their fear or sadness, without trying to fix, dominate, or use it. But someone without true empathy will only mimic the behaviors of compassion. They'll offer the right facial expressions, nod at the right times, maybe even say the words, "I understand." But it's mechanical. There's no resonance. They're not absorbing your emotions. They're scanning them. To them, your pain is a map, not a moment. They're not feeling with you, they're studying you. When you're grieving or struggling, they don't show up with authentic support. Instead, they may disappear entirely, only to reappear later, acting irritated that your sadness threw off their needs. Or worse, they weaponize your low moments. They say things like, "I was there for you when you were a mess," not as a sign of love, but as leverage. Empathy doesn't keep score. But for someone who lacks it, every gesture comes with a hidden receipt, waiting to be cashed in when it suits them best. This absence of empathy also shows in how they handle accountability. When they hurt you, you'll notice a refusal to truly acknowledge your feelings. They may say, "Sorry," but it's often shallow, followed by excuses, blame, or silent resentment. Their apologies feel transactional, not transformative. You don't feel seen, you feel managed. The moment becomes about them preserving their image, not about you healing from harm. It becomes clear they're more invested in maintaining control than making connection. What makes this dynamic especially confusing is that they often present themselves as emotionally intelligent. They might use therapy language, talk about boundaries, or seem fluent in self-awareness. But none of it is embodied. It's all language without depth. When empathy is missing, even the most enlightened conversation feels hollow. You may come away from heart to hearts feeling unheard, as if your pain was processed like data, not emotion. And when push comes to shove, they always choose strategy over sincerity. You begin to realize that every heartfelt moment you shared, every time you opened up, cried, told the truth, wasn't met with warmth, but with a kind of cold interest. Like someone taking notes. Not because they want to connect deeper, but because they want to control better. There's a chilling quality to it. You were never seen as a human with a heart. You were seen as a resource with patterns. And when a person treats your soul like something to be navigated, not nurtured, that's not emotional absence. That's emotional exploitation. One of the most dangerous traits of spiritually corrosive people is their complicated relationship with truth. They don't lie in obvious, clumsy ways. They lie with precision. They drip, feed distorted facts, blur timelines, and offer just enough truth to keep you hooked. These are not the people who tell wild, unbelievable stories. They're far more subtle than that. They use half-truths to confuse your perception, so you're always a little uncertain. And when you're uncertain, you're easier to manipulate. They are experts in creating narratives that serve their image. When they retell a situation, you might recognize the outline of what happened, but not the heart of it. They leave out key context, twist motivations, and rewrite history in their favor. Over time, it becomes difficult to trust your own memory. You find yourself saying things like, "Maybe I'm remembering it wrong," or "I'm not sure if that's how it really happened." This slow erosion of certainty isn't accidental. It's a tactic. It's designed to make you rely on their version of events over your own. One of their most disturbing habits is lying through omission. They don't always fabricate things outright. Sometimes they just withhold what matters most. They leave out the parts that might hold them accountable. They dodge details that would clarify a situation. And when you eventually uncover the full story, they act as if your hurt is unreasonable. "I didn't lie," they'll say. "I just didn't think it was important." But deep down, you know it was important. And they knew it would change how you saw them. In moments of conflict, their dishonesty becomes a weapon. They shift the focus, create distractions, or deflect by accusing you of overreacting. They might even lie about things you know to be true, causing you to second-guess yourself so deeply that you begin to feel unmoored. This is gaslighting, but not in the dramatic movie version way. It's quiet, it's patient, it's deeply destabilizing. They condition you to doubt your instincts, your logic, and even your emotional responses, until you're easier to control. Their lies are also performative. They will tailor their stories depending on who's listening. To one person, they're the victim. To another, they're the misunderstood hero. To you, they might be the regretful partner or friend who's trying to do better. The contradictions pile up, but somehow they always find a way to explain them away. And if you start asking too many questions or pointing out inconsistencies, they accuse you of being negative, paranoid, or unforgiving. The truth becomes something they manipulate, not something they honor. What's especially cruel is how they often demand your honesty, vulnerability, and full transparency, while giving you deception in return. They want access to your heart, your thoughts, your secrets. But they guard their own truth like a fortress, and when you catch them in a lie, they don't apologize, they pivot, they rationalize, they accuse. Because for them, truth isn't a value, it's a tool, and if bending it keeps them in control, they will do it without shame. One of the most confusing and psychologically damaging experiences is dealing with someone who presents one face to the world and an entirely different one behind closed doors. In public, they're charismatic, witty, generous, even admirable. They may be the person everyone praises, the one who lights up the room, the person who always helps out. But in private, something shifts. Their energy hardens. Their voice sharpens. Their words become weapons. The very person others admire becomes the person you fear. This two-faced behavior creates a trap, because when you try to explain what's really happening, how they belittle you, how they twist your words, how they drain you, people don't believe you. Or worse, they defend the abuser. "But he's such a good guy," they say. "She's always so supportive." You begin to feel isolated, even ashamed, for seeing what others refuse to acknowledge. And that's exactly how they want it, hidden, protected by their charm, while you slowly unravel in silence. The contrast between their public persona and private cruelty can make you question your reality. One minute they're making strangers laugh. The next, they're mocking you in a voice only you recognize. They might offer warm hugs and kind words to guests, then turn cold or vicious once the door closes. It's not accidental, it's control. The public charm is their armor. It builds credibility. It ensures that if you ever speak up, you'll look like the unstable one. It's a form of emotional imprisonment. This duality also keeps you in a state of confusion. You wonder which version is real. Is it the sweet, kind person they show the world, or the calculating, punishing version you see in private? You start hoping the nice side will come back. You try harder to be pleasing, agreeable, patient. You think maybe if you're more loving or less reactive, they'll treat you the way they treat everyone else. But no matter what you do, the private darkness always returns, and that becomes your prison. The waiting, the wishing, the walking on eggshells. What makes this so emotionally violating is that their public charm is often used to discredit you. If you express concern or set boundaries, they'll play the victim to others. I don't know what's wrong with them, they'll say. I try so hard, but they're just never happy. You watch them tell this story with a soft voice and sad eyes, and people believe them. Meanwhile, you're breaking down in the background, wondering how your pain became a performance they control. And then there are the moments when they do show you kindness in private, but only after a cycle of emotional damage. This creates a trauma bond, a roller coaster of hope and hurt that keeps you tethered. You begin to confuse manipulation for care. You cling to moments of sweetness like proof that the good version still exists. But the truth is, real kindness doesn't come with conditions. It doesn't vanish behind closed doors. If someone only treats you with respect when others are watching, that's not love. It's a mask. There's a subtle but deeply unsettling kind of evil, the kind that smiles when you fail. These people won't laugh out loud when things go wrong for you. They won't celebrate your pain openly. Instead, they'll offer concern that doesn't feel real, support that seems just a little too delayed, or advice that cuts more than it helps. It's in the tone, the timing, the energy. You sense it in their eyes. Not sadness for your suffering, but satisfaction. Your downfall gives them a quiet thrill, and they hide it beneath a mask of sympathy. You may first notice it when you share good news. Instead of genuine joy, you get a lukewarm, "That's nice," or a quick change of subject. They won't ask questions. They won't celebrate your efforts. Sometimes they'll even point out flaws in your success. "That promotion must be stressful," or "Do you really think that's sustainable?" These comments seem casual, even well-meaning, but they're carefully placed. They're designed to deflate you just enough that you stop soaring. Then, when something genuinely hard happens to you, a mistake, a breakup, a financial hit, you notice a strange shift in their energy. Suddenly, they're more attentive. They check in more often. But it doesn't feel comforting. It feels like curiosity. They want to know details, not to help, but to feed something inside them. They may phrase their questions with care, but underneath, you feel it. They're not here to lift you up. They're here to witness you fall. Slowly, painfully, and with just enough distance to appear innocent. This kind of quiet cruelty is incredibly disorienting, especially when it comes from someone close. A friend, a partner, a family member. We're conditioned to believe that people who claim to love us also want the best for us. But in this case, their love has a ceiling. They love you as long as you're struggling, as long as you're beneath them in some way. The moment you begin to thrive, to step into your power, to become too confident, they pull back. Or worse, they sabotage you in subtle ways to keep you small. What makes this behavior so toxic is that it disguises itself as support. They might say things like, "I'm just trying to keep you grounded," or "I'm only being realistic." But the message is clear: your joy threatens them. Your growth makes them uncomfortable, and so they chip away at your light until you begin to dim it yourself, just to keep the peace. You begin to shrink, not because you failed, but because someone close to you couldn't handle your shine. In time, you realize that they're most alive when you're most defeated. Your sorrow centers them. Your mess makes them feel secure. When you succeed, it triggers something petty and competitive within them. But when you stumble, they relax. They become more generous, more loving, more involved. That's not compassion. That's power. It's emotional parasitism, and it's cloaked in care. They don't want to destroy you outright. They just want you to never rise high enough to leave them behind. One of the most subtle and dangerous forms of manipulation isn't physical or verbal. It's psychological. It happens when someone gradually, consistently, and quietly erases who you are. Not by force, but by influence. Not by commands, but by suggestions, disapproval, and withholding affection. Over time, you begin to lose sight of the person you used to be. Your preferences, your values, your voice. They don't need to tell you directly to change. They just make you feel like who you are isn't acceptable. It starts small. Maybe you laugh a little too loud for their liking, or they raise an eyebrow when you talk passionately about your dreams. So you tone it down. You adjust. You make yourself more palatable to keep the peace. Before long, you stop bringing up certain topics. You stop wearing what you love. You stop making decisions without second guessing whether they'll approve. What you don't realize is that each tiny compromise is another thread being pulled from the fabric of your identity, until what's left is someone unrecognizable even to you. The person doing this often disguises it as concern. I just think you're overreacting. That's not really your style. You're better when you do it my way. It's subtle. It's positioned as helpful, but the underlying message is always the same: you, as you are not enough. So you start to defer. You rely on their opinion more than your own. You look to them for approval before trusting your instincts. And soon, you're not just making adjustments. You're rewriting your personality to survive the relationship. As your identity fades, so does your self-worth. You don't trust yourself anymore. You feel dependent, uncertain, and hollow. You forget what joy feels like when it comes from your own choices. And worse, you may begin to believe that this new, smaller version of yourself is the only version who deserves love. This is where the damage becomes deeply internalized. It's not just that they're suppressing you. It's that they've taught you to suppress yourself. You become your own jailer, enforcing the rules they subtly created. People on the outside might not notice the change. To them, you're still functioning, still polite, still showing up. But inside, you know the truth. You're quieter than you used to be. You hesitate more. You apologize constantly. You've lost your fire, not because life put it out, but because someone made you believe it burned too brightly. And because they never shouted or hit or threatened, you tell yourself it's not abuse. But spiritual abuse doesn't always come with bruises. Sometimes it just sounds like, why can't you just be a little different? Eventually, you start to grieve the version of you that's gone missing. You remember how you used to speak your mind, laugh freely, walk into rooms without feeling like you had to shrink. That person didn't disappear overnight. They were slowly edited out of existence by someone who found your authenticity threatening. And once you see that, the pain hits differently. Not just because they tried to erase you, but because you let them, thinking it was love. There's a quiet voice inside you that doesn't need evidence, logic, or explanation. It doesn't shout, at first. It whispers. It nudges. It tells you when something feels off, even if you can't put your finger on why. This is your intuition. And when you're around someone spiritually toxic or deeply manipulative, that intuition flares up. It warns you, not always with words, but with sensations. Tightness in your chest, unease in your gut, a heaviness that hangs in the air after you leave their presence. You may not know what's wrong, but you know something isn't right. But instead of trusting that voice, you override it. Again and again. You rationalize their behavior. Maybe they're just stressed. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. Maybe it's me. You gather their trauma like reasons to excuse the discomfort they bring. You collect every good memory, every kind gesture, and replay it as evidence against your gut feeling. It becomes a constant battle between what your body is telling you and what your mind wants to believe. And in that gap, they gain control. This internal conflict wears you down. You start gaslighting yourself before they even get the chance to. You tell yourself it's not a big deal. You tell yourself no one's perfect. And that's true, no one is. But spiritual harm doesn't come only from cruelty. It also comes from the slow poisoning of peace. And when you keep silencing your intuition to maintain a connection, you're not preserving love. You're abandoning yourself. The longer you do this, the more disconnected you become from your own truth. What's heartbreaking is that the more you ignore your intuition, the harder it becomes to hear. That once clear voice grows faint. Your instincts dull. You start needing external validation for what you used to just know. You look to others for permission to feel what you're feeling. And if the toxic person is well liked or respected by others, you start to believe your experience is invalid. If they were really that bad, other people would see it. But that's the thing about dark energy. It hides well in the light. Intuition is not fear. It's not paranoia. It's not overthinking. It's wisdom that lives in your nervous system, born from subtle patterns, emotional truths, and subconscious signals your mind hasn't caught up to yet. And when your intuition speaks, especially when it screams, it's never random. It's trying to keep you safe. But when you've been conditioned to doubt yourself, Especially by someone emotionally manipulative, you learn to betray that voice in favor of their version of reality. That betrayal may feel small at first, but it's deeply spiritual. Eventually, you start feeling not only confused but also spiritually disoriented. You're no longer sure where you end and they begin. You become detached from your inner compass, unsure of what's real and what's distorted. And even then, a part of you still knows. A deep, unshakable knowing that something about this person, their presence, their patterns, their energy, is not meant for you. But knowing and acting are two different things. And the longer you stay in that space of inner denial, the harder it becomes to reclaim your voice.